Hello everyone. How are we all doing tonight? Having a nice, calm, cozy Friday night? It's a little bit chilly out. Make sure you're wrapped up in your blankets. Get a nice fire going if you can. Drink some hot chocolate. Tonight, Fizzy is going to read you guys to sleep. We are just going to tell some bedtime stories. I've got here my favorite childhood book. It is The Treasury of Classic Children's Stories from Andrews and McNeil. In 1991, it was originally copyrighted, and this book means a lot to me. I remember my dad used to read this story to me all the time. Of course, being a fairy myself, Fizzy loves fairy tales. And I'm very, very excited to be able to share some of my favorite tales with you. So, let's all cozy up together. Get ready for our first tale we're going to read. Let me flip the pages. If you're reading along at home, we're on page 8, and we're going to read The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, retold by Jennifer Greenway. And this version that I have in my book here is illustrated by Robin Officer. Alright, are we ready to read our first story? Deep in the blue sparkling ocean, deeper than any human has ever gone, the Sea King lived with his subjects in a splendid palace made of rare seashells and pearls. Now, the Sea King had 6 beautiful mermaid daughters. The youngest one was the most beautiful, and she was much quieter and more thoughtful than her sisters. While her sisters enjoyed playing with silvery fish and making wreaths of colored seaweed, the youngest found no amusement in such games. She liked, more than anything, to hear of the world above the sea, and she often asked her grandmother what it was like. The little mermaid loved to hear how flowers on land had a fragrance so different from those under the water, which had none. She was also delighted to learn that the fishes on land, for that's what grandmother called birds, sang beautiful songs. But best of all, she liked to hear about the human beings who lived in the world above the waves. When the daughters of the Sea King reached their 15th year, they were allowed to go to the surface of the water. But the little mermaid, being the youngest, watched all her sisters go before her. When the oldest sister came back, she spoke of the twinkling stars. The second described a beautiful sunset. The third saw a garden full of flowers. The fourth told about the vast blue sky. And the fifth was amazed by giant pale icebergs floating in the ocean. Yet despite the wonderful sights above the water, all the little mermaid sisters agreed that the world beneath the waves was far more beautiful. I shall have to see for myself, the little mermaid thought wistfully. How I wish my turn would come. At last, the little mermaid's 15th birthday came, and she went up to the world above the waves. It was evening, and the sky sparkled with silver stars. A ship lit with colorful lanterns sailed toward the little mermaid. The people on board were having a party. The little mermaid swam up and peered through the window of one of the cabins. Inside, she saw a handsome prince laughing and talking with his friends. He had just turned 16 years old, and the party was in honor of his birthday. The little mermaid fell in love with him at once. If only he could see me, she thought. Perhaps he would love me too. Just then, the little mermaid saw that a terrible storm was blowing up. The waves began rising higher and higher, and the wind whistled. Soon the ship began to creak and groan. "We're going to sink," the little mermaid heard one of the sailors yell. Finally, the ship began breaking apart, and everyone on board was cast into the water. At first, the little mermaid was glad, since now the handsome prince would be with her. Then she remembered that humans could not live underwater. I must save him, the little mermaid thought. She dove again and again, At last she found the prince deep beneath the waves. He was still alive. She pulled him to the surface. She held his head above the water, and they drifted all night. By dawn, the storm had passed, and the little mermaid saw a quiet beach. Just beyond the sea, a white church nestled on a hill. She swam to the shore while still holding the prince and dragged him onto the sand. She kissed him on the forehead, but he did not wake up. I just realized my model has been really still this whole time. I apologize if that was uncanny at all. It's because my microphone has been in the way of my camera. Let me just adjust that a bit. Alright, I do apologize. Let's get back to the story. Then the church bell rang, and a group of young women ran out of the church door. The sound of their voices frightened the little mermaid, and she hid behind a rock. One of the young women ran onto the beach and up to the prince as he was opening his eyes. She was very beautiful, and the prince smiled at her. "You have saved my life," he said, for he did not know it was the little mermaid who had really saved him. Then the young woman helped the prince to his feet and led him away to the white church. The little mermaid sighed and swam under the waves back to her father's palace. When her sisters asked her what she had seen above the waves, she would not answer. But day and night she thought of the handsome prince, and she grew sad and pale. The little mermaid began to spend all her time roaming the world above the waves, looking for the prince. One day she came to a beach where a large marble palace stood. To her joy, she saw the prince walking along the shore, for this palace was his. After that, the little mermaid came every day to secretly watch the prince. Her love for him grew, but she dared not show herself because her grandmother had told her that humans were afraid of mermaids. They believe that everyone should have 2 of those props they call legs, her grandmother had said, and they think our tails are very ugly. If only I had legs, the little mermaid thought. Perhaps then I could make the prince love me. Then the little mermaid decided to do a terrible thing. In the very depths of the ocean, there lived an ancient sea witch. She was wicked but very powerful. So the little mermaid went to seek her advice. When the little mermaid entered the sea witch's cave, the sea witch stared at her and cackled. "I know why you have come, foolish princess," she said. "I can give you legs, but it will not be easy for you. You will be as graceful as you are now, but each step you take will feel as if you are treading on sharp knives." "I do not mind," replied the little mermaid, thinking only of the prince. "There is more," the sea witch went on. "Once you have taken a human form, you will never be able to live with your family under the waves again. Moreover, if the prince does not love you in return and agree to marry you, you will perish. The morning after he marries another, your heart will break and you will be nothing, only the foam on the waves." The little mermaid turned pale. "I will still do it," she said. "But I must be paid," said the sea witch. "In return for giving you legs, I must have your voice." The little mermaid faltered. Her voice was the loveliest of all the sea creatures and far more beautiful than that of any mortal. "But how will I make the prince love me without my voice?" she cried. "You are very lovely," said the witch. "Use that to charm him." "Very well," said the little mermaid. So the little mermaid gave her voice to the sea witch, and in return the sea witch gave her the magic potion that would make her legs. The little mermaid waited until night and sadly bid farewell to her sleeping father, grandmother, and sisters. Then she swam to the beach near the prince's palace and swallowed the sea witch's potion. She felt as if a sword had been passed through her, and she fainted. When she awoke, it was morning, and to her surprise, the prince was standing over her. The little mermaid looked down and saw that she had 2 pretty legs and dainty feet. "Who are you?" the prince asked, but the little mermaid could not answer. She was so lovely, and her blue eyes looked so sad that the prince took pity on her and led her to his palace. As the sea witch had promised, every step the little mermaid took was as painful as stepping on sharp knives, but she bore it bravely. The prince ordered his servants to dress her in fine robes. When this was done, the little mermaid was the most beautiful young woman in the palace. Yet she still could not utter a word, only stare at the prince with her sad blue eyes.
"You poor creature," the prince said. "If only you could speak to me. You remind me of a girl I met once who saved my life when I almost drowned. She is the only woman I can ever love, but I shall never see her again. So will you stay with me instead?"
When she heard that, the little mermaid's heart almost broke. She wished she could tell the prince that it was she who had saved his life, but she could not say a word. The prince made the little mermaid his closest companion. She did all she could to please him, but he only spoke of the one who had saved him.
"I shall never see her again," he told the little mermaid. "But I am glad that you at least have been sent to me, my beautiful, silent friend."
Then the little mermaid danced for him, though it hurt her terribly. She danced so gracefully, the prince was enchanted and said she must stay with him always. One day, the king announced that the prince must marry the daughter of the neighboring king. The prince told the little mermaid that he would never do so.
"I cannot marry that princess when I love only the girl who saved me," he said. "I would rather marry you than anyone but her."
He kissed the little mermaid on the cheek. The next day, the king prepared a ship to travel to the nearby kingdom. The little mermaid accompanied the prince on the journey. When the ship reached the shore, the neighboring king and the princess were there to greet them. When the prince saw the princess, he cried,
"But she is the one who saved my life! All my wishes have come true."
As soon as he was on land, he ran to the princess, leaving the little mermaid standing alone. The princess was very beautiful, and her eyes were kind and gentle. The little mermaid stared at her. "She is lovely, and she seems good," the mermaid thought. "The prince loves her, for how can he know that it was I who saved his life and not she? So now I must prepare to die." The wedding of the prince and the princess was celebrated that very night. The prince asked the little mermaid to stand close to him during the wedding.
"You must share in my happiness," he said.
So the little mermaid held up the bride's veil and smiled, even though her heart was broken. "Tomorrow I must die," she thought. "I will never see my dear sisters or my father or grandmother again." And a tear rolled down her cheek. Late that night, the prince and his bride went to bed on the ship that was to carry them back to the prince's kingdom. Meanwhile, the little mermaid stood on the deck and gazed at the sea. Then she saw her sisters swimming toward her. Their beautiful long hair had all been cut off. The eldest one carried a sharp knife in her hand. They were all weeping as they called to the little mermaid.
"Dear sister, we gave our hair to the sea witch in exchange for this knife. Before the sun rises, you must kill the prince with it. Then your legs will disappear and your tail will grow back. After that, you may come and live with us under the waves again."
The little mermaid took the knife and went inside the ship to the prince's room. He lay there asleep beside his bride. When she saw him, tears came to the little mermaid's eyes, and she ran to the deck and flung the knife into the sea. Then, as the sun was rising, she threw herself into the water. She waited to die and become like the foam on the waves, but instead, she felt herself being lifted high into the air. "Where am I?" she cried. "You are with us, the spirits of the air," replied a host of musical voices. "Because of your good deed, little mermaid, you have been made one of us. You will not die. Instead, you will travel around the world, spreading peace and kindness, and you will live with us forever." The little mermaid felt full of joy. Looking down, she saw the prince gazing sadly into the water, as if he were looking for her. She flew down to him and whispered, "Do not be sad. All is well." As the prince's face grew peaceful again, the little mermaid joined hands with the other spirits of the air and rose into the clouds. The end. A little different than the Disney version, huh? That's much closer to the original Hans Christian Andersen version. And once again, that was The Little Mermaid, adapted from Hans Christian Andersen and retold by Jennifer Greenway. I love that story. It was one of my favorites as a kid. Something about it. I love that the ending isn't necessarily what you'd expect the happy ending to be, but it's not a sad ending either. I love a story where the protagonist learns that they want something different than they think they do. And in this case, she just wanted to be free above the waves, and she did it. Alright, let's look at our table of contents and pick out our next story, shall we? Alright, if you're reading along at home, we're going to jump to page 278. Very far into the book. But this is my absolute favorite fairy tale. My number one favorite. We're about to read Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay, let me get to the correct page here. Do you hear the creaking of this old book? Alright. Here we have Snow White by the Brothers Grimm, retold by Jennifer Greenway, the same person who retold our last story, and this version is illustrated by Aaron Augustine. Alright. One snowy winter day, a queen sat at the window sewing on a frame made of ebony. She pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell in the snow on the windowsill. The red blood looked so beautiful against the white snow that the queen exclaimed, "I wish I had a daughter, as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony." A short time later, the queen gave birth to a daughter whose skin was white as snow, whose cheeks were red as blood, and whose hair was black as ebony. She named her child Snow White, and not long after, the queen died. Snow White grew up to be the most beautiful girl in the world. She was so good and kind that everyone who met her could not help but love her. Even the birds and the trees and the animals of the woods adored her. When Snow White was still a child, her father took a second wife. She was a very beautiful woman, but proud and spiteful. She could not bear the thought that anyone else might be as beautiful as she. Now, this queen had a magic mirror, and whenever she looked into it, she would say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, whose is more fair than you?" Oh, looks like my OBS is disconnected. Alright. Sorry about that we're just having a moment here. Are we back? Looks like we're live again. Alright, let's get back into the story. I'm gonna go back a paragraph just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Alright. Each year, however, Snow White grew more beautiful. One day, when the queen looked into her mirror and asked it who was the fairest of them all, the mirror replied, "You are very fair, 'tis true, but Snow White is more fair than you." When the queen heard that, she turned green with envy. The queen called her huntsman before her. "You are to take Snow White into the forest," she said. "Kill her there, for I do not wish to set eyes on her again. And bring me the girl's heart in this box as proof that you have done as I ordered." The huntsman then led Snow White deep into the forest. But as he was drawing his hunting knife to kill her, Snow White cried, "Please spare my life. Let me run away into the forest, and I will never come home again." Snow White was so young that the huntsman took pity on her. He said to her, "Run into the woods, dear child." and he killed a deer and took its heart to the wicked queen as proof that Snow White was dead. After he had gone, Snow White was alone in the forest. She was so frightened by the shapes of the trees and the rustling of the leaves that she began to run. Wild beasts sprang at her, but they did her no harm. On she ran, over rocks and through brambles, until it began to grow dark. Snow White was so tired. She thought she could not take another step. Then up ahead she saw a tiny cottage. Snow White went inside. Everything in the cottage was very clean and tidy, and also very small. There was a little table covered with a white cloth and set with 7 little plates, each with a spoon and a knife and a cup. And against the wall, all in a row, were 7 little beds. Snow White was very hungry and thirsty, so she ate a bit of bread from each plate and drank a drop of water from each cup, for she did not want to take everything from any single one. Then, as soon as she was tired, she lay down on one of the beds. Soon she was fast asleep. A while later, the owners of the cottage came home. They were 7 dwarves who spent their days mining in the mountains. As soon as they lit their candles, the dwarves saw that someone had been there while they were out.
"Who has been eating from my plate?" said the first.
"Who has been drinking from my cup?" cried the second. And on it went, until the 7th dwarf caught sight of Snow White, fast asleep in his bed. He called the others over, and they all stood and stared in wonder at the sleeping child.
"How beautiful she is," they whispered, and they decided to let her go on sleeping.
The next morning, Snow White was frightened when she woke up and saw the 7 dwarves, but they smiled kindly at her and asked her name. "Snow White," she replied. Then she told them how her wicked stepmother had ordered the huntsman to kill her and how he had spared her life.
"Why don't you stay here with us?" the dwarf said. "You can cook and keep house for us, and we will take good care of you."
Snow White agreed, and so she kept the cottage for them and always had supper ready when they came home from working in the mountains. As Snow White was alone all day, the dwarves warned her to be careful.
"Do not let anyone in," they said, "for your wicked stepmother will surely discover where you are and come looking for you."
At that very moment, the wicked queen looked into her magic mirror and asked,
"Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?"
And the mirror replied,
"You are very fair, 'tis true, but in a cottage far away, where the 7 dwarves do stay, Snow White is fairer still than you."
The wicked queen shook with rage. Snow White lived. Her magic mirror never lied. All day she schemed until at last she settled on a plan to get rid of Snow White. First, the wicked queen made a poisoned apple. Half of it was Snow White, and the other half was rosy red, and it looked delicious. When the apple was ready, the queen disguised herself as a poor farm woman. Then she traveled to the 7 dwarfs' cottage. When the queen knocked on the door, Snow White came to the window. "I cannot let anyone in," Snow White called out. "But I only wish to sell you some of my apples," replied the farm woman. "Here, try one." And she held out the poisoned apple. But Snow White said, "No, I dare not." "Are you afraid I might poison you?" laughed the farm woman. "Look, I will cut the apple in 2. You take the rosy red half, and I'll take the white." But Snow White did not know that the red half was poisoned. "Very well," Snow White said, for the apple looked so delicious she could not help herself. Eagerly she bit into it. No sooner had she done so than she fell down dead. When the 7 dwarfs came home that night, they found Snow White lying pale and still on the ground. They called her name and tried to shake her awake, but it was no use. Snow White was truly dead. At the palace, the wicked queen gazed into her magic mirror and asked who was the fairest of them all. The mirror replied,
"You are the fairest of them all." Finally, the wicked queen was satisfied. The 7 dwarves wept over Snow White for 3 days. Then it was time to bury her. But she looked as if she were still alive, and they could not bear to put her in the cold ground. So they made her a glass coffin and wrote her name on it in gold letters. Then they set it in the forest. For a long time, Snow White lay in the glass coffin, yet her beauty did not fade. One day, a prince rode into the forest and saw the coffin. Snow White looked so lovely that he fell in love with her. The prince begged the dwarves to let him have Snow White's coffin. At last, they took pity on him and agreed. The prince ordered his servants to carry Snow White in her glass coffin to his palace, but on the way, one of them tripped. The coffin fell, and the piece of poisoned apple flew from Snow White's throat. Snow White opened her eyes. "Where am I?" she cried, looking up at the prince. "You are with me," he replied, "and I wish you to marry me and stay with me forever." It's a nice, beautiful illustration on this page. The prince looked so kind and sincere that Snow White said yes, and their wedding was celebrated with great joy. The 7 dwarves all came and danced and cheered. As for the wicked queen, she was so angry that she ran into the forest and was never seen again. And with no one to wish them harm, Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. That one's a little closer to the story you guys probably know. A nice happy ending with Snow White and the prince. If you've watched my short series, where I give you some fairy tale facts, I talked about versions of the story where the coffin gets dropped instead of true love's kiss. I had forgotten that the version in this book had that. I wonder what I thought of that when I was a little kid and this story was being read to me. Alright, now once again, if you're reading along at home, we're skipping over to page 62. Snow White is my favorite fairy tale, but my favorite one in this book is Rapunzel. Again, we're on page 62. This is Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm, retold now by Fiona Black and illustrated by Victoria Lisi. Alright. There once lived a man and his wife who longed with all their hearts to have a child. At last their wish was granted, and they were both glad. Now this couple's cottage had a window that overlooked a high stone wall. On the other side of the wall was a beautiful garden. This garden belonged to a wicked witch, and no one dared enter it. One day, as the woman was gazing out the window and down into the garden, she happened to see some Rapunzel. The Rapunzel leaves looked so fresh and green that the woman could not help wanting some. How tasty it would be, she thought, and her mouth began to water. The woman knew she could not possibly have any of the witch's Rapunzel, yet her longing for it grew stronger each day. At last she became so pale and ill, her husband grew worried and asked her what was wrong. "Ah," sighed the woman, "if I do not get some of the Rapunzel from the witch's garden, I will surely die." The man loved his wife and did not want her to become ill, so he decided he must get her the Rapunzel. That night he climbed over the high stone wall and into the witch's garden. He plucked a handful of the Rapunzel and quickly returned to his cottage. The woman prepared a salad of the Rapunzel and devoured it at once. But the Rapunzel was so delicious that her desire only grew stronger. Her husband became afraid his wife would surely die if she could not have more Rapunzel. So that night he once again climbed over the high stone wall and into the witch's garden. Just as he was about to pick a handful of the Rapunzel, he looked up to see the witch standing over him. "How dare you, you thief!" the witch screamed at him. "Who do you think you are that you may steal Rapunzel from my garden? I will make you pay dearly for this." The man fell to his knees and begged the witch for mercy. "I only stole the Rapunzel for my dear wife," he cried. I was afraid she would die if she could not have some, and she is about to bear our child."
When the witch heard about the child, she quickly grew calm.
"If what you say is true," she said, "you may take as much of the Rapunzel as you like on one condition. You must give me the child your wife is about to bear. Do not be afraid. I will take good care of your child and love it as a mother would."
Since there was nothing else he could do, the poor man agreed. When his wife gave birth to a girl, the witch took the child away. The witch named the child Rapunzel and brought her up as her own. Rapunzel grew to be a most beautiful child. Even the blazing sun was in awe of her beauty, as was the shy, silvery moon. When Rapunzel was 12, the witch shut the girl in a high tower in the middle of the forest so no one would ever steal her away. This tower had no door and no staircase. Instead, there was a single window at the very top. Whenever the witch wanted to visit Rapunzel, she would stand beneath this window and call up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel, whose golden hair had never been cut, would wind her long, long braid around a hook at the top of the window. Next, she would let it tumble down to the ground like a thick golden rope. Then the witch would climb up it as if it were a ladder and visit with the girl. One day, a handsome young prince was wandering in the forest near Rapunzel's tower. As the prince rode past the tower, he heard someone singing in a pure, sweet voice. It was Rapunzel, who often passed her lonely days singing to herself. The prince stopped to listen. The singing was very beautiful, but there was something sad about it, too. The prince found himself longing to meet the singer. He rode around the tower looking for a door or a staircase, but he could find no way inside. At last, as it was growing dark, he rode home. But the prince could not forget Rapunzel's singing, so he returned to the tower the very next day. The prince was listening to Rapunzel's singing from behind a tree when the old witch appeared. The prince watched while she called up to the high window, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince was amazed to see a braid of thick golden hair tumble out the window. Then he saw how the witch climbed up it into the tower. "So that is how it is done," the prince said to himself. As soon as the witch had climbed down and left, the prince ran to the tower. Then he called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately, Rapunzel let down her shining golden braid. The prince quickly climbed up it and was soon standing in Rapunzel's tower room. At first, Rapunzel was very frightened of the prince, for she had never seen a man before. "Who are you?" she cried, backing away. The prince told Rapunzel his name. Then, speaking to her gently, he said, "Your singing so touched my heart that I could not live in peace until I met you." As he talked, Rapunzel began to lose her fear. Instead, he was much more charming companion than the witch. After that, the prince visited Rapunzel daily, but only in the evening, since the witch came during the day. Soon the two young people grew to love each other. One day, the prince asked Rapunzel if she would marry him. "Yes," Rapunzel replied. "I will gladly marry you, but first I must find a way to escape this tower." Then Rapunzel told the prince that every time he visited, he must bring her some strong silk thread. "I will ply it into rope," she said, "and when it is finished I will climb down from the tower and we can be together always." Every day the prince brought a skein of silk thread. The witch suspected nothing. Finally, the rope was almost finished. Then one day, when the witch came to see Rapunzel, the girl carelessly said, "Oh, Granny, why does it take you so much longer to climb up here than it does the prince?" "What are you saying, you wicked child?" the witch snapped. We have another beautiful illustration. "Nothing," stammered the girl, realizing what she had done. But it was too late. "I shut you away from the world, and still you have managed to betray me?" the witch shrieked. The witch seized Rapunzel's one braid in her right hand and twisted it tight.
Then with her left hand she took a pair of scissors and snip! She cut off Rapunzel's long golden braid. Then the witch took the weeping Rapunzel far away to a barren desert. There she left the girl to live in poverty and misery. That evening the prince came to the tower and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The long, shining hair came cascading down as usual, and the prince climbed up to the window. Inside the tower he found waiting for him not his dear Rapunzel, but the wicked witch. "Your beautiful songbird has flown away," the witch crooned mockingly. "The cat has got her, and now the cat's going to scratch out your eyes." Then she rushed at the prince. In his grief and confusion he leaped out the window. Some bushes broke his fall and saved his life, but their sharp thorns put out both his eyes. For several years the prince wandered blind and almost out of his mind with sorrow. By chance he came to the desert place where Rapunzel was living. He heard a pure, lovely, familiar voice singing a sad song. It was Rapunzel, and as the prince drew close, she recognized him. She threw her arms around his neck and began to weep. When her tears fell into his eyes, his sight became clear again, and the prince saw his dear Rapunzel. He took her away to his kingdom where they were married, and they both lived happily ever after. That one is another one of my favorites. I love this version of the story too. This is the one that I remember being read as a child. Like most vividly, I remember reading this story with my dad, and I remember he would try to change that part at the end so that nothing bad happened and the prince didn't get blinded. And I was probably 5 or 6, and I would sit there and tell him, "No, that's not what the book says. We have to do what the book says." And then I would take over reading it for him, and that's just such a happy memory for me. I think we're going to read one more story, and then we're going to call it a night, but this has been really fun. For our last story, we're on page 34 of this book, to read The Frog Prince by the Brothers Grimm, retold by Fiona Black, and this version is illustrated by Wayne Parmenter. Alright, we ready to read the story? Okay. One sunny day, a beautiful princess went for a walk in the woods. After a time, she came upon a cool well and sat down beside it to rest. Then, to amuse herself, she began tossing a golden ball in the air and catching it. This golden ball was the princess's favorite toy, and she often passed her time happily playing this game. The princess tossed the ball higher and higher in the air. Finally, she tossed it so high that when it came down again, it bounced out of her hands. It rolled away and fell into the well with a loud splash. The princess sprang to her feet and peered down the well to look for her ball. But the well was very deep, so deep she could not see the bottom. The princess began to cry. "How I wish I could get my golden ball back," she sobbed. "I am sure I will never have another one like it." The more she thought about her ball, the harder she cried, and the harder she cried, the louder her sobs grew. Suddenly a voice called out to her, "Princess, why are you crying so?" The princess lifted her head and looked around to see who was speaking, but all she saw was a large, ugly frog sitting beside the well. "Princess, please tell me why you are crying," the frog asked again. "Oh," said the princess. She was a little surprised, for she did not know frogs could talk. "It's only you speaking, old frog. It's no good telling you about it, since you can't possibly help me. I've lost my beautiful golden ball down the well, and I am sure I shall never get it back again." With that, the princess began to cry even more bitterly than before. "Please stop crying, princess," said the frog. "I can get your ball back for you, but what will you give me in return?" "Well," said the princess, drying her tears, I will give you my fine silk scarf, or my pearl necklace, or my diamond earrings, or even my ruby and emerald crown. You may have whatever you like, dear frog, only please get me back my golden ball." The frog replied that he had no use for the princess's clothes or jewels or anything else that belonged to her. "I ask only this, dear princess," he said, "that you will let me be your friend and live with you a while. I wish to eat with you from your little golden plate and sleep beside you in your little golden bed. If you promise all this, then I will get your golden ball back for you."
"How can a frog who swims in a well and croaks all day possibly come and live with me?" the princess thought to herself. "The frog is just being silly. Everyone knows frogs don't eat from plates or sleep in real beds." So the princess said to the frog, "I'll promise whatever you like, only please bring back my golden ball." At that, the frog jumped into the well and swam deep into the cool water. When he came up, he had the ball in his mouth. He climbed out of the well and dropped the ball at the princess's feet. "My ball!" she cried happily. Then she picked up the beautiful golden ball and went running off without even saying thank you to the frog.
Wait for me," he croaked, hopping after her. "You promised you would take me with you. I am too small to keep up with you. Wait."
The princess did not wait. Instead, she ran home and quickly forgot all about the wet, ugly frog. The next day, as the princess sat down to dinner with the king and the rest of the court, she heard a strange noise outside. Flip-flap, 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 it went, as if someone were flopping up the palace steps. Then there came a soft knocking at the door, and a voice implored,
"Open the door, princess dear. Your true friend is waiting here. Remember what you promised me by the cool well water deep?"
The princess got up and ran to open the door. She was most surprised to see the frog sitting on the doorstep, and she blushed. She slammed the door and ran back to the table and sat down. The king looked curiously at his daughter.
"You seem flushed," he said to her. "Who was that at the door? A horrible witch or a wicked dragon or a mean giant?"
The princess sighed. "Oh no, father, of course not," she said. "It was only a stupid, nasty frog. You see, I was playing with my golden ball in the woods yesterday when it fell down a deep well. The frog said he'd get the ball back for me if I promised to be his friend and let him live here with me, so I did. Father, I never thought he'd really come, but now here he is." No sooner were these words out of the princess's mouth than the frog knocked on the door again. Then he called out,
"Open the door, princess dear. Your true friend is waiting here. Remember what you promised me by the cool well water deep?"
The princess clapped her hands over her ears so as not to hear the frog. The king looked sternly at her and said,
"You gave your promise, and now you must keep your word. Go and let the frog in."
The princess made a face. "Yes, father," she said in a small voice, and she went to the door and opened it. The frog hopped through the door and happily followed the princess to the table. Splish, splash, splish, splash, splish, splash, went his green webbed feet. The princess did not like the frog one bit. She sat down again to eat her dinner, but just as she was lifting her golden fork, the frog called out,
"Lift me up beside you. I want to eat too."
The princess pretended not to hear. Then the king said,
"Go on, lift him up. Remember what you promised."
"Yes, father," said the princess in a very small voice, and she set the frog beside her. The frog asked her to push her plate closer so he could eat from it too. The princess did so, but it was plain that she was not happy about it. The frog tasted everything on her plate and seemed to enjoy the meal very much, but the princess hardly ate anything at all. When the meal was over, the frog said,
"Now I am tired. Please take me to your room and let me sleep in your little golden bed."
The princess scowled. "No, I won't," she began, but then she caught her father's eye and she sighed loudly. "Very well," she said in a small voice. "Come with me." Then the princess picked up the wet, nasty frog and climbed slowly up the stairs to her room. She set the frog down in the corner and climbed into bed. Soon the frog hopped over to her.
I'm tired, he croaked, and I want to sleep in a comfortable bed just like you.
The princess put her pillow over her head so she wouldn't have to listen.
If you don't lift me up onto the bed right now, said the frog, I'll go and tell your father.
The princess sighed and pushed aside the pillow. She picked up the frog in her fingers and placed him on her pillow. And there the frog slept all that night. As the sun rose, the frog woke up. Then he hopped out of the princess's bedroom and down the stairs and through the palace door. He did not come back all day, which was a relief to the princess. When dinner came, she looked around anxiously for the frog, but he was nowhere to be seen. Thank goodness, thought the princess. I won't be troubled by that ugly, nasty frog any more. But that night, as the princess was about to go to sleep, there was a knocking at her door. She opened it, and there was the frog. The princess was not pleased, but she picked the frog up and laid him on her pillow without another word, and there he slept all night long. The next morning the frog left. Good, thought the princess. I only hope that I never set eyes on that dreadful frog again. But secretly, she did not hate the frog nearly as much as she had at first. Indeed, she almost felt sorry for the creature. The frog did not appear all that day, nor did he show up at the dinner table. But that night, just as the princess was about to climb into bed, the frog knocked at her door. She picked him up and laid him on her pillow, and he fell asleep there. The next morning, when the princess opened her eyes, the frog was nowhere to be seen. Instead, to her astonishment, a handsome prince was standing at the foot of her bed and looking at her with a charming smile. "Who are you?" the princess asked, looking around in bewilderment. "And where is the frog?"
"I am the frog," the prince replied.
The prince then told the princess that a wicked witch had put a spell on him and changed him into an ugly frog. She had sworn that he would remain in this form forever unless the princess took him from the well and let him sleep on her pillow for 3 nights.
"You have broken the witch's cruel spell," the prince said, "and now I wish to marry you and take you with me to my kingdom. I promise that I will always love you. Marry me, and I will do all I can to make you happy."
The princess smiled and gave the prince her hand. "Very well," she said. "I will marry you, my frog prince." When the happy couple told the princess's father what had happened, the king was overjoyed and ordered their marriage to be celebrated that very day. Afterward, the princess and her frog prince set out for his kingdom. As he had promised, the frog prince always loved his princess and treated her kindly, and the 2 of them lived happily ever after. All right. I think that's where we're going to leave it off tonight. I think that's going to be the last story. Thank you for joining me and for letting me read some stories to you guys. I hope we're all nice and ready to sleep now. It's pretty late here. I don't know if it's late for you guys too, but get nice and warm in bed. Have a good little midnight snack first. And sleep well, Fizzy's friends. Tomorrow we'll be back to play Date Everything. But for now, I will let you all go. I bid you all good night. Au revoir.